Now we are going to discuss the process of quotation. What is a quotation? You have taken so many quotations in your life probably. If you want to take an internet connection, you just moved to a new apartment or home, you call up the vendors, right? You call up Comcast or you call up AT&T and you ask them what's the price. You compare the price and then take what's the right decision and then choose a provider. What are you doing here? You are taking a quote and then comparing the quote for prices and bandwidths and whatnot, and then making a decision on which one to go for, right? And if you want to buy a phone, you do the same thing. You go to a shop or you go online, you compare the different phones. iPhone, Samsung, LG, Motorola, so on. Want to buy a car? You do the same thing. You go to different dealers, get quotations from different dealers, and then compare them and make what's the right decision. Same thing with coffee, not different. Now, when we talked about contracts and scheduling agreements in one of the previous sessions, we said we're going to negotiate with the vendor using a buyer's negotiation sheet, and then if the vendor is willing to offer us a better price, then we go with it, right? That's negotiating with one vendor. Now, you can negotiate with multiple vendors. And how do you do that? You can do that using a formal process called quotation. A quotation is a request for pricing and other details on a product or service. In this case, we are asking the vendors to quote the price of coffee at a fixed lot for a fixed amount, for a fixed quantity. For example, we want 100 kilos of flour, right? And we know that vendor 4001 supplies coffee, 4002 supplies coffee, and say 4003 also supplies coffee. Now we want to compare the prices and then make a decision, right? Of course, price is not always the only criteria. There are other terms like payment terms, quality, timely delivery, other factors as well that go into that decision. Because when you compare iPhone and Samsung, you just don't go for the price, right? You look at quality, you look at so many other factors. Same thing with coffee. But you want to compare the price first. Why? Because it's a very important factor, right? So, let's compare the price of 4001, 4002, or 4003 and then make a decision. So how do we do that? The first step is send a request for a quotation to these vendors 4001, 4002, 4003. This is called request for quotation, RFQ. What is it going to contain? It's going to contain the quantity that we require, what we require, and when we require them by. And the vendor is going to respond with his prices and if he can deliver them within that deadline or not. That is called a response to the RFQ. So the vendor responds. So this is called the response to the RFQ. And this response is documented as a quotation. Quote 1, quote 2, and quote 3. Because we have sent out this RFQ with 3 vendors, right? And each of them sends a response. And each of these responses is documented in 3 separate quotations. And now you can do a price comparison. And one of the bids becomes successful, meaning based on a variety of factors, like we said, price, delivering criteria, quality, timely delivery. Based on these parameters, somebody in the purchasing department is going to make a decision and award that order to one of the vendors. This process is called the quotation process. You could call it RFQ process, quotation process, either way. So let's create that in the system. So what do we want to do? We want to create an RFQ first and then document their responses and compare the prices. So 3 steps that we want to do here. So the first step is issuing the RFQ to the vendors. The second step is documenting the responses in the quotation, and the third step is price comparison. And of course the final step being awarding that order to one of the vendors. So let's do step number 1 now. How do you do that? Right under logistics, material management, purchasing, and RFQ, go to the first step, request for quotation. Simple, right? Click on create. Now by default AN is selected, AN for RFQ, just select that. And because we are sending this out to so many different vendors, we want to put a deadline. Just like how you apply for a university and they have deadlines, right? So similarly, we're going to put a deadline. A deadline to submit the quotations is, say, 10/31. I'm just going to put a date. And over here, we use something called as a collective number. Now, we can make this not mandatory, but most of the time, this is a really useful field. So what's a collective number? So each of these is a separate document. For example, this document is 500000101. This is 500000102. 500000103. And then you could be issuing these RFQs with 10 vendors. Each of these vendors would have a separate document, 101, 102, 103. And when you want to do actions further, like document the quotation, do a price comparison, you're basically going to work on all these documents. And can you remember these documents? So many of them. That's crazy. You can't. So a collective number is basically a code that is linked or ties all these documents together. You have 10 documents that you have issued to vendors and you want to collectively work on them. You just tag them as let's say with a number, or you could tag it with a text. It really depends on what's really comfortable for the purchasing guy. Say for example, we want to tag it as 2001. So all these numbers, purchase requisitions, will be tagged as 2001. And this 2001 is really a tag that binds all the RFQs together in one place. And that is called as a collective number. So remember, a collective number is just a way to tag different RFQs together so that they can be managed easily. So what's our tag? Our tag is 2001. It's just a tag, remember, nothing more than that. You could do something like this also, A, B, C, D, doesn't matter. Anything is fine. Okay, so 2001, enter. And here, what do we need? We need coffee beans as usual, right? And say we are asking for a quantity of 10,000 or 1,000, whatever, right? And when do we need them by? That's also an important criteria, right? Depending on the date, the prices might change. So we need them on, say, November, right? End of November. Okay, now we have created the RFQ, basically the template, which is saying I need coffee beans of 1,000 pounds by such and such a date, and please respond within 31st of October. But who should it go to? It should go to vendors, right? 4001, 4002, 4003. And we supply them here. Click on vendor address and we say 4001, enter, enter, save it. And the screen is going to remain right there. It's not going to go back like typical screens. Now you can put more vendors in there. 4002, enter, save it. And then you can also do 4003, 4004, as many vendors as you want. Now we have decided that we are going to send it to 3 vendors, right? So each of these 3 vendors get a separate document. The content is going to be the same, but we are going to track them as separate RFQs. See, one is 18, another is 17, another is 16. But luckily for us, we don't have to remember all those documents. I'll tell you how. Because we use collective numbers. So we go back and the creation step is done, right? So let's say we wait for a few days and then we get responses. Responses could be via phone calls, via fax, via emails, or whatever medium that the vendor is comfortable with. So this step is complete. Step number 1 is done. Now step number 2 is to document the quotations that we receive. And how do we do that? In the RFQ quotation, click on, earlier we clicked on request for quotation. So we created an RFQ. Now we're going to document the responses that we get. So click on quotation and click on maintain. Each of these vendors has been given a certain document number, and we only need to document them in the corresponding document number, right? So the way to do that is a little tricky. You'd have to search using the collective number. There are many options here. Now if you click on this, there are a variety of ways in which you can search for the RFQs. But go here and then select search by collective number. Right? That way it's much easier. So go select a collective number of 2001. That's the number, that's the tag that we have given to the vendors to submit the RFQs. And then click OK. And these are our RFQs: 16, 17, 18. 16 is with one vendor, 17 is with the second vendor, 18 is with the third vendor. Say 16 is with vendor 4001, and he is offered to deliver us 1000 pounds of coffee at say 9.75 per pound. Okay, save it. Now say 17 is vendor 4002, and he is offered us at 9.65 per pound, right? Save. And then of course vendor 4003 has promised us at 8.95 per pound, and save. Now we have done step number 2. We have put the prices in there and saved it. And in order to pull down those RFQs, we have used the collective number 2001. Now the third step is price comparison. We need to compare the prices between all the codes and pick the winner. So go click on price comparison and then again use collective number 2001. Right? There are different ways in which you can compare. You can compare the minimum value, you can compare by the mean value, you can compare based on the discounts and list prices, but we don't understand all those things yet. Let's just do a basic comparison. See, SAP is comparing each of the vendors based on the RFQ numbers, and it's giving us the price that they're offering us. It's just a comparison. We can go to each of the individual documents and then compare it to yourself. This is like a one big screen where it shows the comparison between all the vendors and it's ranking them. The first guy is 895 and the second guy is 965 and the third guy is offering at 9.75. So it's ranking them so that you can make a better decision. This looks pretty straightforward because there's just one product. Now if you do multiple products in the same RFQ, I need 100 pounds of coffee, 100 pounds of sugar, 100 pounds of this, 100 pounds of that. In that case, the comparison is not that straightforward because for coffee, one vendor might be better. For sugar, another vendor might be better. Right? So in cases like that, the SAP's comparison in one big screen is going to really help you make a decision. And of course, still there is a lot of manual intervention required because there is a lot of judgment that's required. But nevertheless, the price comparison tool helps us make a decision in terms of which vendor is best. And of course, finally, you're going to award this contract or order to one vendor, the vendor that you think is the best. And for the rest of the vendors, you send rejection letters. Now, in the price comparison, what we found is this guy is ranked 1, this guy is ranked 2, this guy is ranked 3. So 4003 is the preferred vendor because he is offering coffee at 8.95, which is the cheapest that we've got so far. So we can create a contract with reference to that RFQ, and we need to tell these guys, the other vendors, that we have gone with another vendor, so we don't need you anymore for this transaction. So we're going to send them rejection letters. So this vendor is accepted for this transaction, and the two other vendors are rejected for this transaction. Now this is just purely for the transaction. We're not rejecting the vendors forever. For this particular RFQ, we're going to reject these vendors and accept one of the vendors. So we want to accept vendor 4003 but reject the other two vendors. How do we do that? Go to ME49, the price comparison. Put the collective number in there. Hit execute. And we said we want to accept the first vendor, the vendor that was ranked first, but reject the vendor 2 and vendor 3, right? Select that line item, the one that you want to reject, and click on quotation. Select rejection indicator, save. Same thing with the vendor that has ranked the third. Select it, go to quotation, reject indicator, save. That means that the first vendor is selected, but the second and third are rejected. So now we have to send the messages to the vendor saying, hey, you know what, you have been rejected. Go to print transmit, put the numbers in there. What are the numbers? 6, 7. If you don't know those numbers, that's fine too. You can just go click on the possible list of values and go by the collective number 2001 and hit enter. And it automatically picks up all the purchasing documents, the RFQs that we have created against that particular collective number. Click OK. Click OK. Now, we only need to send the rejection letter to 2 of these vendors. So select them and click output message. And if you want to see them, you just go click on display message. You can see that it's a rejection letter and it's related to the particular RFQ, when it was dated, what were the materials that we asked for, etc., etc. Now we can also send an acceptance letter to the first vendor, right? And how do you do that? So instead of ABSA in the message type, ABSA is a rejection letter, quotation rejection, right? There's also a quotation acceptance output. And instead of ABSA, which is a quotation rejection, you could have NEU, which is the message that you send when you create the quotation, or you can create your own custom success bidding message, which SAP standard does not have, and use that message to print the corresponding output for a successful bid. Now this is not the message for a successful bid, it's a message that goes out when you issue the RFQ, but standard SAP does not have the successful message output, and in order to have that, you have to create your own custom message. Now outputs and messages is something that we have not seen yet. We'll see that in customizing in one of the later chapters. But for now, just understand that it's going to be a message type here. You select a successful quotation message type as opposed to rejection, and select that RFQ number or quotation number and execute. Select that quotation number and click on output message. So this should send the accepted or successfully accepted message to the vendor 4003. So this completes the RFQ and quotation process. So what have we done here? We have asked for 100 kilos from these three vendors and asked them to submit a quotation. We have done that through the RFQ, step number 1. And we have tagged all these RFQs with a collective number called 2001. And after some time, step number 2, the vendors have responded and they have recorded their terms, like prices, what payment terms they're ready to offer, when they can deliver the goods by, so on and so forth. Step number 3 is we did a price comparison. We did a price comparison between the different quotations that we received, and SAP helped us finalize which vendor offered the lowest price. And all the higher prices were rejected. We sent them rejection letters, and the successful bidder was accepted and we sent him an acceptance letter. So we have successfully completed the quotation process.